Okay, this is video lecture number 21, Creating Republican Institutions. We are going to look at the post-war years from 1776 to 1787. 5 sections to cover today. We're looking at the state constitutions. We're going to examine the role of women as they seek a public voice. We're going to look at the Loyalists that remained and what happened to them. And then finally, the Articles of Confederation and Shays' Rebellion. So the American revolutionaries never tired of insisting that their cause was not limited merely to securing independence from Great Britain. They expected to inaugurate a new world order, a new order for the ages, by demonstrating that a republic in which the people were sovereign and governed themselves without the benefit of kings or lords could be a stable and permanent form of government. The Virginia Declaration of Rights and the Statute of Religious Freedom capture some of the optimism of these revolutionary Republicans as they announced their commitment to equality and their commitment to the natural rights of mankind. Of course, bold proclamations alone weren't enough, as the women who participated in the mobility described by Abigail Adams discovered, as men stood amazed by their actions. Similarly, the plight of the Delaware nation illustrates the limits of revolutionary republicanism. And we can be reminded that the War of Independence involved more than the contest between the British and the Americans. There were lots of different people involved, ranging from women to slaves to natives. Finally, pro-slavery petitioners argued that the Virginia Declaration of Rights notwithstanding, slavery and the principles of the Revolution were not necessarily incompatible. So let's look at creating Republican institutions with our first section, the state constitutions. How much democracy? In 1776, Congress urged Americans to suppress royal authority and establish new governing institutions by writing state constitutions to achieve republicanism. The Declaration of Independence stated that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. This is republicanism, the idea that the people are in charge rather than some royal authority. Pennsylvania's Constitution abolished property owning as a test of citizenship, allowed all male taxpayers to vote and hold office, and they created a unicameral legislature with complete power. John Adams denounced the Pennsylvania unicameral legislature as so democratical that it must produce confusion and every evil work. In his Thoughts on Government from 1776, Adams devised a system of government that dispersed authority by assigning lawmaking, administering, and judging to separate branches. He called for a bicameral legislature in which the upper house, filled with property-owning men, would check the power of the popular majorities in the lower house. And he proposed an elected governor with the power to veto laws and an appointed, not elected, judiciary to review them. Patriots endorsed Adams' system. They loved it because it preserved the idea of representative government while restricting popular power. They didn't want the masses of people to have too much power. But they were wary of any veto power by the governor, or what became the president. And most states did keep some kind of property qualification for voting. The Adams bicameral legislature emerged as the dominant branch of government, and state constitutions apportioned seats on the basis of population. Most of the state legislatures were filled by new sorts of political leaders then. Ordinary citizens increasingly chose to elect men of middling circumstances rather than electing their social betters. Only in Vermont and Pennsylvania were radical patriots able to take power and create completely democratic institutions. Yet everywhere, representative legislatures had more power, and the day-to-day politics became much more responsive to the demands of average citizens. So let's look at women seeking a public voice. upper-class women entered into the debate, but remained second-class citizens unable to participate directly in politics. Most politicians ignored women's requests, as did most men, who insisted on traditional gender roles that empowered themselves. The Republican quest for an educated population provided the avenue for the most important advances made by American women. So let's go to the next section then, the Loyalist Exodus. As the war turned in favor of the Patriots, thousands of Loyalists emigrated to places like the West Indies, back to Great Britain, and up to Canada. While some Loyalist lands were either sold or given to Patriot tenants, in general, the revolutionary upheaval did not alter the structure of rural communities. Social turmoil was at its greatest in the cities, as Patriot merchants replaced Loyalist Tories at the top of the economic ladder. The war replaced a tradition-oriented economic elite, one that invested its profits from trade in real estate and became landlords, with a group of these brand new entrepreneurial-minded Republican merchants who promoted new trading ventures and domestic manufacturing. And then the Articles of Confederation are created, and this is our next session. The Articles of Confederation were passed by Congress in November of '77, and it was ratified finally in 1781. The Articles provided for a loose confederation in which each state retained its independence, as well as the powers and rights that were not expressly delegated to the United States. The Confederation government was given the authority to declare war and peace, to make treaties, and to adjudicate disputes between states. They could print money, and they could also requisition funds from the states. A major weakness, though, under the Articles of Confederation was that the Congress lacked the authority to impose taxes. Robert Morris persuaded Congress then to charter the Bank of North America in the hope that its notes could stabilize the inflated continental currency. The Confederation refused Morris's proposal for an import duty to raise revenues for the national government as well. Instead, Congress asserted the Confederation's title to the Trans-Appalachian West in order to sell the land, and raise additional revenue for the government. So that was their answer for how to raise money, by selling land. In 1783, Congress negotiated with Native American tribes to obtain new western lands. It created the Southwest Territory, which were the future states of Alabama and Mississippi, on lands that were ceded by North Carolina and Georgia. Slavery was allowed in these places. The Northwest Territory was also established, and three ordinances in the 1780s provided for its orderly settlement while reducing the prospect of secessionist movements and dependent colonies of the states. Now this brings us to our last section, which is Shays' Rebellion. In the East, peace brought recession. The British Navigation Acts barred Americans from trading with the British West Indies, and low-priced British goods eventually flooded the American markets. State governments were saddled with large war debts in the form of bonds, which speculators demanded state governments redeem quickly and at full value, a policy that required high taxes. Yet yeoman farmers and artisans hard hit by the post-war recession demanded and were given tax relief. So we have an issue here of not enough money. To assist indebted yeomen, many states ended up printing more paper currency and passed laws allowing debtors to pay their creditors in installments. Now, the lack of such debtor relief in other places, such as Massachusetts, provoked an armed uprising led by a man named Captain Daniel Shays. This uprising, known as Shays' Rebellion, was a struggle against taxes imposed by a distant government. To preserve its authority, Massachusetts passed a riot act outlawing illegal assemblies. Shays' army dwindled during the winter of 1786 and 87 and was eventually dispersed by Governor James Bowdoin's military force. Many families who had suffered while supporting the war felt that they had traded one kind of tyranny for another, and others feared the fate of the Republican experiment. So this does conclude video lecture number 21, Creating Republican Institutions. We looked at the years immediately following the war and some of the difficulties that the states encountered with trying to build this brand new Republican government. So at this time, go ahead and answer the review questions that you see on the screen and continue on to your reading.